Welcome back to our series on the Aquila 32 Sport owner experiences, where we cover our personal experiences, address problems, and provide solutions where we can find them. This is part 2 on my coverage of the SureShade problems and solutions on the Aquila 32. From my last video, the solutions I provided for the water intrusion into the Bimini motors, we discussed the addition of the drains under the motors and addition of the dams at the end of the cylinder channels. I went out during the next drain event and looked to see if I was still getting the drainage down the plastic tubes I installed port and starboard in the cabin, and I was. So the addition of the dams at the end of the cylinder channels didn't solve the problem. So I figured that the problem has to be that huge gap between the Bimini cover and the end of the top. Overall, the top of the Aquila 32s tilt toward the front of the boat. However, at the rear it tilts right and left from the center and toward the rear from there. So water is definitely directed towards this gap. My solution to this was kind of like the rubber in your car doors. So using that approach, I picked up some double-sided tape and some 6-foot lengths of rubber pipe insulation at Lowe's. I used 2 different sizes, 1/2 inch and 3/4, because the gap in the rear varies from 3 inches at the center to less than 1 inch on the ends. This material is largely crushable, which is exactly what you want. I figured out how much I could keep in between and how much I could let go underneath the rear Bimini cover, and began the process of the manual formation of the rubber. I started out by removing the self-adhesive and forming it to itself until reaching the ends of the 6-foot piece, where I had to trim it to taper it to a smaller diameter. I then used the 1/2 inch piece that I bought to go from there to each edge. I then figured that I needed to permanently place it with the double-sided tape about 3/4 of an inch below the edge of the top. The double-sided tape that I bought is 1 inch thick. I worked from the center outward. Your method might differ. For me, it was easier to stick the tape to the top, place the rubber where I wanted it, and while applying pressure, slowly peel the backing off the other side of the tape, making sure that the rubber was exactly where I wanted it. After getting it in place, I ran the top out a few inches and then back in to make sure that it wasn't too snug and adversely placing pressure on the top motors. You want it so that it keeps 99% of the water out. It doesn't have to be perfect. For example, where the 3/4 rubber meets the 1/2 inch piece, it doesn't necessarily need double-sided tape to seal it off. The crushing, or let me say very light crushing, of the rubber should squeeze the two together enough to stop water penetration. Once in place, this should stop the water that rushes toward the rear while you're parked or underway from getting into the gap. The water should then run right and left and off the top at the edges. Okay, water intrusion. Where can we get water into the boat? Well, this is one of the places, but this actually drains out the front drain, which is right there in the bow. Right there is where it's going to drain into the boat. But you can take this flap and go over the door that's there, and it's got stamps on it. It stamps into the door. But when you do that, all the water that comes off this top goes right into the boat, and there's a lip between the I don't know, cabin, I guess, and the front bow. And right there is where your drain is. So if the water goes past that lip, it stays in the boat, which you don't want. So unsnapping this bow cover is going to be what you want to do. You can also get some water that comes right up in here. There's a little bit of a gap you can see. That's going to be on all of them. It's identical on the outside as well. So let's take a look here to see if these top modifications have worked. And I think that we're still getting some water. I can see just a little bit in here. So as I pour it out, there it is. So we're still getting some of this water that's draining from some source and coming up and down these drains, but not that bad. So this has taken care of a majority of it. So yesterday we had some real flooding rains come by, and I think that the inside of the boat is dry, so that's a good thing. But the idea is just to try to get the water away from these motors. So Anyway, let's take a look and show how the rain event would have basically been affected. We've been testing this to make sure that this water goes exactly where it's supposed to be going, making our own rain event, so to speak. You can see where the water's running over here on the left side, doing exactly what we want it to do. Not going up those channels. All coming down right there. You see some running out here, which is good. So that dam must be working. You see here where it's running down. That's good. Now back to the previous conversation on water intrusion from the bow. This is the other side of that door. So you can see that if you snap along here, the water is going to come over down this door and this way into the cabin. But on the other side of that door is a drain. So there's your drain. So if you leave that thing right where it's at, it's going to fall over, hit this door, and it's going to flow right down and go into that drain. That's exactly where you want it. So I would definitely add this rubber gap filler to your to-do list I gave you from the last video. Personally, I think the end product actually looks pretty good and like it belongs to the boat and not some DIY project, and that's exactly what you want. Well, I hope this helps, and until next time, see ya!